Alright, you erectile foreclosure packages, you're here with Goldberg, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience purchasing a house. This may or may not be relevant to you, maybe you've done so in the past or you will do so, or perhaps you're going to live in a van down by the river. And nothing particularly wrong with whichever option you choose, but I just thought there might be some value if I go into detail. So I have had a complicated relationship with the idea of buying a house for a while, because I've seen it firsthand with rental properties. It can cost you a lot of money, it's a lot of time, it is certainly no guarantee of success, but at the same junction, you have a little bit more freedom as a homeowner. So I went back and forth. A year ago, I was of course doing van life, and I could have kept doing that. You are always flush with cash if you are doing van life, unless you need to use the cash for toilet paper, as we've seen recently. The only problem with van life is that you have very limited space to operate. And I'd also rented apartments before. The last one I rented, I was in this older complex, and this crazy granny below me kept phoning in noise complaints if I just walked around my apartment. And she said they have to fix the floor. I was like, they're not going to do that. It's an older unit, right? I think they're going to like put you in a different apartment, tear it all up now. And so that was an adventure. And that's the thing with apartments, it's all going to be about who you're around. It could be great or it can be terrible. And there isn't all that much control you have on that particular category. So around summer of last year, I said, I might as well go ahead and do it. It gives me more space to run businesses and also a little bit more independence in case something like this happens, like a pandemic. I also want to be able to grow my own food, have my own water supply, and so those were certain factors that came into play. To begin with, I said no condos, because condos are basically overpriced apartments, and usually the condo fees, which don't typically go into your mortgage, are very high, and they can just get higher, especially if you end up needing to do some major repair on the entire building. So I said either an end-unit townhouse or a single-family home. And it was, summer of last year, started looking into it more seriously. In the early fall, I looked at a house that was about $270,000, very nice, like 3,000 square feet, 2-car garage, lots of bedrooms. But that was a little bit too pricey for my purposes. Like, I want to have tenants, but I also don't necessarily want something that's going to have a huge monthly payment, because that's one of the big things you'll find. So, to begin with, in terms of apps, historically I've used Zillow and Trulia. And then someone told me about Redfin. Now, Redfin's the most accurate if you want to see fees, because you'll look at one of these listings on Zillow and it'll be like, oh, it's only like a $50 HOA. That sounds awesome, dude. And then you call up the agent and you get put on like 10 different mailing and email lists, which is a pain, and like 3-5 people a day are calling you. It turns out, in fact, that that's just the HOA fee. And then if you have the community fee, it's actually $400, $500, $600, $700 a month. That money, by the way, is not going towards your mortgage, all right? It's not going towards your loan. A lot of it doesn't even entirely accommodate your utilities, so you're still paying these certain utilities on top of that. So be aware of it. Just because you're getting something like a condo that's cheaper, you might get destroyed when it comes to monthly fees. So I looked at a number of townhouses, or actually, let me go back to the apps for a second. What the realtors told me is this. If you use Redfin, Zillow, or Trulia, they will put up listings that don't exist just to get hits. And so there were some I called this lady about, and she's like, yeah, that hasn't been on the market for years. They're just cycling it back through so that they get an audience. Okay, so it's a little bit sneaky. Like a lot of modern SEO companies, that's how they operate. So if you really want accuracy, use the realtor.com app. That has the listings that the realtors themselves get. All right. And the other thing is you have to have the proper realtor. I went through a few, and they'll say, well, I can't talk to you if you started with another. It's unprofessional. Bull crap, doesn't actually matter. You don't want a younger realtor. You want someone who's got experience, and preferably someone who has owned rental properties and has had like a fixer-upper. Those are the people who are more honest, and they'll point out stuff, look, this actually has to be repaired, this is how much it's going to cost. They're going to be the straight shooters. The ones that are just younger or haven't actually own much in terms of property. They're just wanting to get their commission and walk away. So that's a big difference. Look for the older people, but also look for people who have owned their own properties. Round about the fall, I finally found my first choice, of course, was not single-family homes, but I did find one that met my specifications more or less. It was built in the 70s. It had a nice layout, like kind of a sliding layout. You go down into a basement of sorts. You had a couple of bedrooms, a fireplace area, a bathroom. Then upstairs you had a master bath and a couple more bedrooms. It was a nice design, no HOA, all that jazz, one-car garage. And so I made the offer on it. It was going to be $230. That was my offer. And we got to the inspection, which when you have an inspection, you need to go and follow the inspector, ask questions, and write down notes of your own. You cannot rely on an inspector, though, because they will miss stuff. Even the good ones will miss stuff, and that'll end up costing you. So you need to look on YouTube. If you know someone who does them, ask if you can shadow them. Don't just go by whatever they say, because a lot of them, they're just incompetent, I'm going to tell you. But this guy was pretty good. He went through and he started pointing out, and it was a lot of issues. And I said, yeah, you're looking at buying it for $230 and probably putting $40 to $50 into it. I was like, nah, that don't sound good, okay? At the same time, and this is another key point, I had tried to do my loan through my regular bank. And they kept this hidden to the very end. They said, you only have to put down 5%. Well, you only put down 5% and it comes to where they're going to rate lock. She said 4.5%. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I've got very good credit. And they're like, well, because you're not putting down 20%. I was like, okay, there's just kind of two things at the same time. I said, this is kind of BS. Too many repairs necessary. And then the bank's being screwy. So I said, no, we're not going to continue with this one. And a couple more months vacillating again. Should I do a townhouse? Should I do a single family? Because a lot of the townhouses go quickly. And you have the ones that are 150, those go very quickly. Then you have the ones that are 200, even 250, and they're going crazy fast as well. Even if they're not large, you have like a $1,100 townhome that's listed at 200, and it's not $1,100, 1,100 square feet listed at 200K, and it's going a couple days after getting on the market. So that's one of the big problems. And if you're not aggressively going to see things during the week, as opposed to just on the weekend, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. Well, we actually got to one. It's an interesting story. She opens the door, we go inside, someone yells from upstairs that it's already been sold, even though it was listed on like the official realtor guide, so you see that as well. The market, at least at that time, was pretty good for selling. And finally, I saw this listing. It was for an older house, listed I think about $180. At the same time, I was looking at another one that was more of a bachelor pad house. It didn't have much character. It had a nice like old wood stove on the bottom level, so you could probably heat the house with that. But it was also oil heat, which is extremely expensive. All right, to have oil heat usually. And I was like, it was only I think 1,000 square foot house, and he was asking 180, 185. I said, that's ridiculous. So I had this other house that was much older, listed about 180, and definitely needed work, right? So I looked at it, and it had a good sized yard. It has a old fashioned well, also has like a cistern of sorts. So those are positives, because I'm big on like being able to not rely too much on the system as it runs, just because, as we've seen with this whole pandemic, it's quite unstable. So I looked at it and I was like, this thing obviously needs some work, but if you get it cheaper, it's a lot further along. Okay, it's almost 2,000 square feet. It's got nice character. It's got like 5 some bedrooms, almost 5 bedrooms. Nice interior, solid thing. Fairly well maintained. They could have done a little bit more, but it's not in horrendous shape. And so I think I offered like 165. And then after we had already gotten to a certain point after the inspection, I got it down to 160. Really wanted it for 155, but that didn't work. And so that's the one I ended up buying. Now, a key point to understand here, I went to a different bank. Same thing, put down 5%. They gave me 3.5% on the loan. and I actually bought it down to 3.25. So you see the difference from one bank to the next, how much you can be ripped off if you just go with okay, it's my main bank, I'm not going to question it. That's the first thing. The realtor mattered. I had a lady who was, she used to have 17 real estate properties that she would rent out. She knew a lot about fixing up houses. She was very good, very efficient. And then, of course, the inspection matters. But like I said, you have to be your own inspector. You can't take everything they say. This guy was pretty good. Like I said, he used the same guys for the previous house. He still missed some stuff. Now, it's not huge stuff, but it is a little bit of money you have to put in. So I'm in a position where I think I got it for 160. I think I'm going to end up putting probably about 20 into it, maybe 25. But that will severely up the overall value because, like I said, the house is in decent shape. It's got a good character. It's a nice location. It's an area that's growing a great deal. But those are things you have to preempt. And you have to understand, of course, the best case scenario is not always going to occur. So if you're buying a house, don't budget the bare minimum. Budget above that. If you think your utilities are going to be $400 a month, say, okay, more like $550 should be your budget because you don't know how things change. You don't know if you have internet. What are they going to charge in that particular area? You don't know if they say, well, this repair, it's not that big of a deal. When the actual contractor gets there, it could be a lot pricier. That's another factor. If you have someone come to work at your house, you need to get at least 3 opinions because a lot of them, they'll just do whatever the other person says. So get the first guy, and then when he quotes the second dude, don't tell him what the other guy said because you might actually end up paying more money because he's like, well, I better match that guy because I can rip you off. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. I don't think I'm going to know if it was the best investment until later on, until you finally get tenants in, things are flowing. But as it stands, my mortgage, property taxes, insurance, it's less than $900 a month. And I found it so far pretty affordable to make the repairs. So like anything else, owning a home is a trade-off, but it's something that it's definitely an adventure. And I will say this, you learn a lot, not just about how the mortgage industry works, but you'll learn a lot about what to look for and what to fix when you're touring and visiting all these different houses. So if you have any questions or other content you want to see, drop it below and I'll see if I can get on it.